Let me put one number on the table before we do anything else. 2 brigadier generals, 5 months apart, both killed in Borno State, both ambushed at their own bases. That's not a security challenge. That's not a breakdown. That is, by every international military standard, what happens when a country is at war and losing senior command. Now here's what nobody is asking. If a foreign army had done this, we would have been talking about Article 51 of the UN Charter by now. But because the enemy doesn't wear a flag, Nigeria keeps calling it insecurity. Peter Obi came out and said something this week that cracked the ceiling open. He basically said, no nation on earth would sit down while its senior officers get picked off one by one and do nothing. And he's right. But the real question, the one nobody in the media wants to sit with, is this. Why has declaring a national war on insecurity become more controversial than the insecurity itself? Stay with me, because the answer tells you everything about who benefits from Nigeria's endless crisis. Before we go any deeper, if you're just finding Niger Newsfeed, welcome. This channel exists to break down what's really happening in Nigerian politics without the noise, without the spin, and without the ethnic or religious coloring that clouds everything. And honestly, the only way I can keep doing this, the only way this channel grows and gets better, is if you subscribe. Hit that subscribe button right now. It costs you nothing. It means everything to what we are building here. Stay with me, because this one gets very interesting. So here's what happened, and I'm going to give you the facts cleanly because there's been a lot of noise around the numbers. In the early hours of April 9, 2026, just days ago, terrorists attacked the 29 Task Force Brigade headquarters in Benisheikh, a town about 75 kilometers from Maiduguri in Borno State. This is a military base, a fortified installation under Operation Hadinkai, Nigeria's main counter-terrorism operation in the northeast. And yet, the attackers, identified by multiple sources as Boko Haram and ISWAP, managed to breach it, touch vehicles, destroy buildings, and kill soldiers. The confirmed dead include Brigadier General Oseni Braimah, the commanding officer of that brigade. The Army's official confirmed toll is 2 officers and 2 soldiers, but intelligence sources quoted by AFP put the death toll at least 18. There is a significant gap between those 2 numbers, and that gap itself is a story we'll come back to. Now, why does this feel different? Because Brigadier General Braimah is the second Nigerian general to be killed by insurgents in under 5 months. In November 2025, Brigadier General Musa Uba, commander of the 25th Task Force Brigade in Damboa, was ambushed, captured, and executed by ISWAP. And before him, in November 2021, Brigadier General Zama Zikusu was killed leading reinforcement troops in Askira Uba, also in Borno. These aren't soldiers. These are commanders. These are the men who run entire military formations, and they're being targeted, killed, and in some cases, humiliated. Peter Obi reacted on Friday, April 11th. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, that the moment he heard about Braimah's death, he was immediately reminded of what other countries do when their soldiers are endangered on a battlefield. He called it a clarion call to reflect more deeply on the value we place on our citizens. That statement sounds measured, but if you read it in the context of everything Obi has been saying over the past 12 months, it's a sharp, pointed political message. Let's talk about the structure. Who actually has responsibility for this crisis, and what do they have the power to do? Nigeria's constitution, specifically Section 217, gives the President of the Federal Republic command of the armed forces as Commander-in-Chief, full stop. The National Assembly can declare a war on Section 54, but even that requires presidential initiation. So when Peter Obi and others call for a declaration of war on insecurity or a state of emergency, they are calling on President Tinubu specifically to use the executive powers available to him. What does that actually look like in practice? Under Section 305, the President can declare a state of emergency in any state where public order has broken down. This has happened before in parts of Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa under Jonathan in 2013. It gives the military expanded powers of search, arrest, and operations without the usual civilian oversight checks. Beyond that, there are National Security Council meetings, war powers provisions, and the ability to mobilize reserve forces. None of these are being deployed at full capacity. Here's the gray area that's being exploited. The government continues to classify this as a counter-terrorism operation, not a war, not an emergency, not a state of collapse. That classification matters for everything, from how money is appropriated to how information is managed to what accountability mechanisms apply. When the army says the attack was repelled and confirms only 4 deaths, while AFP's intelligence sources say 18, that's not just a PR disagreement. That's a fundamental information vacuum that the classification of counter-terrorism operation allows the government to maintain. And that vacuum serves certain interests, which brings me to the real layer.
This is the part they don't put in the headlines. Let me ask you a simple question. If you were a Nigerian politician with access to defense contracts, humanitarian relief funds, and security budgets, would you want this war to end? Because here's what an endless war produces. It produces a permanent emergency budget line. It produces contracts for equipment that may or may not arrive, for fuel that may or may not be accounted for logistics that nobody fully audits in wartime. The insurgency in the Northeast has been running for 17 years now. 17 years. That's not a failure of strategy alone. That's a structure that has developed interests. Now, Peter Obi, why is he saying what he's saying, and what is he trying to achieve? Obi has consistently used insecurity as his central political wedge since 2023. He was the Labour Party presidential candidate. He didn't win, though his supporters dispute the outcome, but 2027 is coming, and Obi knows that the most powerful image he can project right now is, "I would have done something different." When he says no nation would lose 10 senior officers and not declare war, he's not just commenting on national security. He's directly contrasting himself, a would-be president who promises urgency, with Tinubu, a sitting president whose government responds to each attack with a condolence statement and promises of more operations. That comparison is deliberate. That language is engineered. Now, who else benefits politically? Think about the North. Borno, Zamfara, Katsina, Niger State. These are states under massive security pressure. Their governors are walking a tightrope. They want federal resources, they want military deployment, but they also don't want a formal declaration of emergency that strips them of executive power and puts federal direct rule in place. That tension means some governors quietly lobby against emergency declarations, even while publicly demanding more help. Then there's the Tinubu administration's calculation. Tinubu came into office with a massive economic reform agenda, fuel subsidy removal, naira unification, all of it. Insecurity is the noise that could drown that narrative out. His team wants to control the security story, acknowledge it, show action, avoid optics of total breakdown, but every time a general is killed, that script gets harder to sell. And then there are the international players. The US already sent 200 troops and drones to Nigeria earlier this year. America launched actual airstrikes in Sokoto in December 2025, targeting ISWAP. The US Embassy in Abuja just cut non-emergency diplomatic staff, citing security risks. The US has already designated Nigeria a country of particular concern for security. That's not background noise. That's a prelude. The international pressure on Nigeria's government is building in a way that has no recent precedent. Now, the silent player in this entire story that nobody names loudly, the defense lobby. Nigeria spends billions on defense annually. The 2026 budget passed by the Senate is 68.32 trillion naira, the largest in Nigerian history. A significant portion goes to security. The question of whether that money is being deployed effectively or whether it's being diverted is a question that an escalated declaration of emergency would force into the open, which is exactly why some people prefer the current ambiguity. Now, if what I just laid out surprises you, if you didn't know the US had already launched strikes in Sokoto, if you didn't know this is the second Nigerian general killed in 5 months, drop a comment below. I genuinely want to know your take before we get to the part that changes the whole picture. And while you are down there, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. I don't run ads, I don't take sponsorships from political parties. This channel only grows when real people who want real analysis share it and subscribe. You subscribing is how this content keeps existing. That's the truth. Let's zoom out. What does the death of a second brigadier general in 5 months actually mean for Nigeria as a whole? First, morale. There are soldiers deployed in the northeast right now who just watched their commanding officer get killed in his own base. The psychological cost of that on serving troops cannot be overstated. A retired naval officer quoted in Vanguard this week put it starkly. He said in recent weeks, Borno has seen senior officers killed, units destroyed, and equipment taken, and up till now, nothing significant is happening. That is an indictment from inside the system. Second, the economy. Insurgency doesn't stay in a box. It depresses agriculture in the northeast, which directly affects food prices nationally. It closes roads, kills supply chains, and forces mass displacement. Currently, over 2 million people are displaced from the northeast alone. Every displaced person is a consumer removed from the productive economy and placed on humanitarian dependency. Kebbi, a state that borders Niger Republic, saw 1,900 people displaced just this week from bandit raids with no military intervention. Kwara State, which borders Benin, not a traditional conflict zone, has now seen JNIM attacks. The map of insecurity is expanding, not contracting. Third, federalism. When the federal government announces operations, sends condolences, and promises more equipment, but bodies keep piling up, state governors start making their own calculations. Some are arming local vigilantes, some are negotiating quietly with armed groups, some are simply trying to manage population movement. That kind of localized improvisation, in the absence of a coherent national strategy, is exactly how you get fragmentation of authority, which is exactly the condition insurgent groups thrive in. And fourth, interfaith and inter-ethnic trust. I'll be careful here because this topic has sharp edges, but you have to acknowledge when attacks fall predominantly in the Muslim North and when Christian association leaders are loudly demanding military intervention and when the US frames its engagement around allegations that Christians are being targeted, that religious optic is real whether or not it fully captures the complexity on the ground. Obi has to walk a fine line here too. His political brand is built on being above ethnic and religious tribalism, but his base is predominantly Southern and Christian. When he talks about insecurity, he knows exactly whose attention he's holding. This is a section I don't want to skip because what's happening internationally is not a footnote, it is a core part of the story. The United States has been quietly escalating its engagement in Nigeria over the past year. Earlier in 2026, 200 US troops were deployed to Nigeria in a training and technical support role. The US military was very clear that these troops would not engage in combat directly. Nigerian forces maintain command authority, but they are there, they are operational, and they brought drones. In December 2025, US forces with Nigerian assistance launched airstrikes in northwest Sokoto State, targeting the Islamic State Sahel Province, ISSP, fighters who typically operate in neighboring Niger Republic. That was a significant milestone, the first confirmed US strikes on Nigerian territory. Add to that, Nigeria has been designated a country of particular concern by Washington, partly triggered by Trump's claim that Christians are being targeted in the crisis. And just this week, the US Embassy in Abuja reduced its non-emergency diplomatic staff presence. That's the kind of move embassies make when they're running risk assessments that don't look great. On the ECOWAS side, things are complicated. The military coups in Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso have effectively gutted the regional counter-terrorism coalition that Nigeria used to anchor. The multinational joint force that once operated in Lake Chad Basin has been structurally weakened. Nigeria can no longer rely on a coordinated regional response.
What should Nigerians in the diaspora understand? Simply this: Nigeria's security crisis is no longer being treated internationally as a domestic matter. It is being watched, it is being engaged, and if it deteriorates further, it will be managed by outside actors in ways that Nigeria's government may not have full control over. That's the reality.
Now, let me stillman the other side, because this channel doesn't do cheerleading. It does analysis. Misconception number 1. Declare a state of emergency. That will fix it. It won't automatically fix anything. The 2013 emergency declaration in the Northeast gave the military expanded powers, but Boko Haram still took Gwoza, still kidnapped the Chibok girls, and still held significant territory in 2014. Emergency declarations are a tool, not a solution. Obi saying, "I would have declared war," is rhetorically powerful, but it doesn't tell us what the day-after strategy looks like. Misconception number 2. The government is doing nothing. That's not accurate. Operation Hardin Kai has recorded genuine operational successes. ISWAP commanders have been killed, supply routes disrupted, and the insurgents have been pushed back in multiple areas. The Army's own statement says the April 9 attack was repelled. The problem isn't that nothing is happening. The problem is that what is happening isn't enough and isn't being sustained with sufficient strategic coordination. There's a difference. Misconception number 3. This is Tinubu's fault. 17 years of insurgency predate Tinubu by over a decade. The roots of the crisis go back to failures under Obasanjo, Jonathan, and Buhari. What is fair to say is that Tinubu inherited a crisis and has not escalated the response to match the escalation in attacks. His framing of the April 9 attack as a sign of desperation by a weakened insurgency, while a general just died in that attack, is the kind of messaging gap that undermines public confidence. What does this mean long-term? If the government doesn't close the credibility gap between what it says is happening and what the evidence shows is happening, the social contract between Nigerians and their security institutions will continue to erode. And when citizens stop trusting institutions to protect them, they start building alternatives. And some of those alternatives have uniform and a very different agenda. So what should you be watching for in the coming weeks and months? Signal number 1, the U.S. Embassy staff reduction. When a major embassy starts pulling non-essential personnel, it's running a security model that says things might get worse before they get better. Watch whether any other Western embassies follow the US lead. If they do, that's a significant escalation of international concern. Signal number 2, the 2027 political calendar. Every single thing being said by opposition figures right now, including Peter Obi, is being calibrated for 2027. Watch whether Obi formalizes a campaign platform around security. Watch whether northern political elites start breaking from Tinubu over the insecurity in their states. The cracks in the APC coalition, if they open, will open on this issue. Signal number 3, the defense budget and procurement. Nigeria's 2026 budget at 68.32 trillion naira is the largest ever passed. If you follow where the security allocation goes, who gets contracts, what gets procured, what actually arrives at the front line, you'll understand a lot about why the crisis persists. Best case scenario, sustained operational pressure forces ISWAP and Boko Haram into genuine degradation, U.S. technical support delivers a meaningful intelligence upgrade, and 2027 political pressure forces a more comprehensive security architecture from the Tinubu administration. Worst case scenario, attacks continue escalating, a third Brigadier General is killed, northern governors begin breaking ranks, and the combination of economic hardship and security collapse creates a political crisis that destabilizes the 2027 electoral cycle. The honest answer is, right now, we are closer to the middle of those two scenarios than most official statements will admit. I opened this video with a question: why has declaring a national war on insecurity become more controversial than the insecurity itself? Here's my honest answer. Because declaring war means accountability. It means clearly defined objectives, measurable outcomes, and someone to blame when they aren't met. The current framing of counter-terrorism operations gives everyone, the presidency, the military, the governors, a comfortable level of deniability. Things are happening, things are hard, the enemy is complex, nobody is clearly failing.
Peter Obi is right that no serious nation watches its commanding generals get killed and keeps issuing condolence statements. He's right that the casualty figures rival countries officially at war. He's right that the response doesn't match the reality. What he hasn't fully answered yet, and what the government hasn't answered, is what comes after the declaration. What is the end game? Who sits at that table? How does Nigeria address the political economy of insecurity, the incentives that keep parts of this crisis alive? Until someone answers that question, we're going to keep having this conversation over the coffins of soldiers who deserved better. I want to know what you think. Leave your take in the comments. Do you believe a formal declaration of emergency would change anything? Or is this a deeper structural problem that no declaration can fix? If this breakdown gave you real clarity on what's actually happening, not just the surface headlines but the strategy underneath, do me a favor. Share this video with one person who needs to understand it. And subscribe to Naija Newsfeed, not as a favor to me, but because this channel is only strong as the people who choose to be part of it. Every subscriber is a vote for analysis over noise, for facts over spin. You being here, choosing to stay informed, that's what makes this work possible. I'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp.